Okay, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the Lake Forest Park City Council Committee of the Whole for what day? Oh, this is July 24th, everyone. To order, please. And is there anyone that would like to make citizen comments at this time? There's no one in the council chambers. Anyone online, Matt? I don't.
There are no attendees online.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. And tonight we have two topics. The first one is discussion regarding police department staffing issues. And the second one is just a quick wrap up of section 8 of the council governance manual relative to updates. And we had to punt that from the June meeting. So we're bringing it back at this time. And then hopefully in September, we can do some final discussions and of the edits and then adopt it post haste after that, put it behind us. Okay, with that, Chief, you have the floor, my friend. Thank you. Welcome.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. And Council, thank you very much. I have a few slides. I got to say that I started this with 58 slides, so get ready. I whittled it down because most of you already know our staffing issues and what's going on internally, but I wanted to give an executive overview. Let's see.
You're okay with that? It's so weird that I'm looking at everybody looking at me.
I can wait if you want to switch. It's all good.
Your call.
This is sort of like a careless watching careless in Spaceballs. Please continue.
Okay. So first of all, I wanted to just briefly go over that we are community first. We answer all the calls that the citizens call in, 2.5 minute average response time. An LFP officer is going to respond. We don't have online reporting. We provide that customer service. Community service is the key to success, open lines of communication, intimate knowledge of our community, daily presence at our schools, rigorous graffiti abatement, advanced training, high level of professionalism. We provide the value in what we do. We have an operation plan that we follow. We've been doing for the last decade, and we want to maintain an accessible community-oriented policing department equipped to manage calls on par with the large urban agencies. As you know, we're a small town with big city problems. So the view that we have right now is we have 23 full-time employees. That is what is approved in our budget. We have 15 patrol, which consists of sergeant and officers, 3 administration, which is myself and our division commanders, the lieutenants, and 3 support, our support officer, 2 records, and 2 detectives. We also have, it's actually approved 24.4 with an emergency manager and the DV advocate, but we're just going to be talking about the police department side of it. So where we are in a map of this is if everything was filled and everything's beautiful, this is what we look like in our organization. We have myself and the 2 lieutenants over the 2 divisions. The one thing I will continue to point out that a council needs to look at down the road is we do have that one crew that doesn't have an officer in that spot that I'd someday would like to have as an approved budget going forward. Where are we today? So we are currently at 21 full-time employees. 14 in patrol, 1 detective, 3 admin, and 3 in support. But what's important is the current deployable. So 21 employees, we have 11 in patrol, 1 detective, 3 admin, 3 support. So one of them is a recruit. They're not deployable until they're solo on the road. We have 1 that's a sergeant that is now moving to this limited term employee. So they're going to be leaving next year. So we have them on a different assignment. And so that's actually an open position that we're looking at. And then 1 is injured for a couple of months. So that's what's currently deployable. And I also want to point out to the council that we have open internal positions that we're working on. So with the sergeant leaving that crew, we need to do a promotional exam for sergeant. We still need to fill the detective role. And then the traffic officer that's current has been moved into the acting sergeant role. And if he takes on the sergeant role and gets hired as that position, or takes on the detective position, I'd have to fill for a traffic officer. Also, we are down a firearms instructor, defensive tactics instructor, and if we ever do bring back canine, that's something that we need to do internally. So there's lots of internal things that are there too. So this is what that looks like at this current. You have in red the acting sergeant, which was down at the bottom. Now that's an open position. Sergeant Adams has left, and Officer Walker, our traffic officer, has moved into that position. The other crew has an open position. The one crew here that has the sergeant and officer has an injured, so there's only 2 on that crew. And then we have the recruit in one of the crews, but they're not deployable probably until about, I'm going to say around April, May. So it's quite a while away. And then the detective position is still part of that group, but it's is also empty. And this is what it looks like when you pull away everything. This is what we're currently operating with. And when you look at this and you have a sergeant and 2 and sergeant and 2, acting sergeant and 2, and 1 detective, keep in mind, we still have to take care of vacation, holiday, sick, Kelly, mandatory training, and any other training that needs to go on in this group right here. So if anybody leaves, we're in that critical stage for whatever reason, and we're still managing it, but it has been tough, and we use overtime, but judiciously. So I've talked about the staffing that we have currently. Now I'm going to talk about the future and retirements. We are on LEF 2, which is the retirement system for police and fire. The things that you got to understand is 1, 53 years old and has more than 5 years on as a police officer can retire with full pension. 50 years or old with more than 20 years on can also retire, just at a reduced rate. So right now where we're at is we have 6 commissioned officers who are eligible to retire today. All of them are in leadership roles from sergeant to chief, which is 138 years of experience. 7 commissioned officers will be eligible to retire in under 3 years. So that's just adding 1 more. So that's not 13 there, but that's adding 1 more person to that group, and that's under 3 years. So that means 1/3 of the police department is eligible to retire and then under 3 years. And I'm just going to give you a little brief average for our department. The average age for all of our staff is right now 45 years old. The supervisory staff is 52 years old is the average age. And you can see how that plays into the retirement that we're talking about. Average age of all staff not in a supervisory role is 40 years old. So the average years of experience, so the commissioned officers, that's everybody in the whole department, averages out to 13 years. Supervisory staff is 22 years. So you can see the problem there again with retirement. And then the average age of all of the staff not in supervisor roles is 7 years. So that's what this looks like with the retirement. As you can see in red, that's eligible to retire. That's literally everybody that's above an officer, except for the acting sergeant at this particular point in time. And that's the under 3-year range. So now let's talk about recruiting and hiring. So hiring new officers is a long and complicated process. So this really began last October when our first, our detective had left. And that's when this whole thing started, and an officer that was on medical leave left the profession. So that started at the end of 22, and so far in 23, we've had several oral boards with 30 plus applicants. It's probably close to 45, 50, but I'm just being conservative there. 2 oral board days were with applicants that didn't even receive a passing score. 10 applicants in this period of time processed in backgrounds, but did not get hired. Did not get hired. They either failed the backgrounds, they were hired by another agency, or they withdrew. And by the way, all of this takes time to, from weeks to months to complete these backgrounds. And I'm doing this with 1 detective that now has 70 cases on his workload. And he's using 2 officers that are on one's on a crew with just 2 of them, and the other one is the acting sergeant. So that's where we are on that. So out of all of this hard work with the HR and the PD staff, only one person's been hired through that entire period. So currently we're in backgrounds. We have 5, 2 lateral, 3 entry level. And this morning we had a civil service commission and they certified, I believe it was 4 more. And so we are at 16 on this list, which is a good thing because we have had a very small list for a very long time. We're starting to see a lot more applicants come in. So it's been great. And also the commission, I explained what we're doing with this staffing and what's going on. And the commission on their own decided to make a motion to support over hiring, which is very nice of them to do. So the solution for right now, unless somebody else has some magical solution, which I'd love, is we're requesting authorization to hire +3 from the budgeted 23 full-time employees. So allow 3 additional limited time employees. This opens up the opportunity to hire current candidates that are great, but they're not high enough on the civil service list because I have a rule of 3. So I have the civil service list that comes in, the top 3, I can pick and hire from that 3. As I pick folks and get them hired on, I can go down the list lower. But if I have 1 position, rule of 3, if I have 2, now I can move down to the 4th and so forth, how the math works. This also gives us the ability to hire people as backup in preparation for applicants that first don't pass the backgrounds, don't fit in with police work before going to the academy. And that could be either by the staff where they say this person is not going to work out as a police officer, or that new hire decides I can't do police work. It also is those that fail the basic academy, which is a 4-month-long process, or after they get into field training for about 3 months, if they fail that part of training. And used to be about 60% pass rate, at least with King County. They may be a little tougher than us. We have more time and dedication to keeping people on board. So that plus is trying to make folks be successful in the job. And then also newly hired employees undergo a 1-year probation period during which they face several challenges in their early careers that could potentially affect their long-term success within the department. So all of these issues pushes out the time, which we don't have because the next few years that changeover. So why we overhire, I'm not going to go into all this text here, but it is here for the public, but training and development, specialized projects and expertise, redundancy and succession planning, employee burnout prevention, time to ramp up productivity, and keeping culture and environment of professionalism and high standards. And I am going to read this. Upholding a culture and environment of professionalism and high standards is instrumental in building a strong and effective police department that serves and protects the community with high integrity and excellence. And why we overhire, the police departments have done this. This is a practice for other police departments and in the private sector, and it's been successful, and our PD has done it in the past. And if we keep doing what we're doing now and we don't ramp up, we will have these problems. Officers will suffer burnout and morale problems. Health and wellness of our workforce degrades. The specialty units, like our traffic unit, are not able to focus on their specialty details. The effectiveness of patrol declines. There's little or no proactive enforcement occurs. The quality of an officer's work product fails to meet our historical high levels, standards, and our community outreach efforts decline, and the expectations of our citizens are not met. And the culture and environment of customer service and value dwindle. I mean, this is sad to say, but I was just talking to the crew that's coming on tonight and talked about a new sergeant that's on and talked about if he were to take vacation, I have 2 younger officers working, and their attitude changes when it depends on who's working. So if you've got a full crew, you can go out there and be confident doing your job and doing it well, being a proactive. But if there's 2 of you and you are a younger officer, you take a different approach. Maybe I'm not going to do as much as I would have done because there's a little bit of fear of now it gets chaotic. I've got so many things going on. So you have to manage that and you have to understand with their perspective when it comes down to it. So the bottom line is, wow, my PowerPoint kind of went backwards there. The level of service expected enjoyed by our citizens is not sustainable at our current staffing levels, and based on expected retirements, current staffing levels, and the sustainability projections, the city needs to practice anticipatory hiring. So I'm asking to approve the authority to exceed the current budget up to 3+ positions in order to address the gaps arising from the current challenges. Bottom line is, I just need flexibility to build a team for the future, and it starts now for that future. I don't want to move in a couple years to a whole bunch of folks retiring, and then we've got new people that have just not experienced enough experience on the road and then had that core value system built in. So I will entertain any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank-
Colleagues, questions for Chief Harden? Please, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate the very detailed presentation. When asking for this +3, as I understand it, because we've had positions open, that there is some sort of budgeted money that can cover a little, but you will be asking for additional. Is that correct?
Yes and no. I'm going to redirect that to our city administrator. Do you want to answer it full? Because
So to the question of the savings, if you remember, we're going to use that to cover the increases that we just did with that 5% increase that we just did for the folks in PD. So that's really not on the table. There will be an increase. And the chief and I have talked about this a lot over the past several days. It's hard to pinpoint the exact dollar amount of those increases because it's going to be, on the chief to decide, when he's hiring. Is he going to hire all +3 at once? Is he going to trickle them in? I think we just need to see what the market looks like. As I played with the numbers today, it's basically a bell curve. You're going to have where you have those +3, and you're talking about $500,000 extra to carry them in any budgeted cycle. And just one other point I wanted to make for the council is that as we go through this, if you were to move forward with this, you would obviously do a resolution. We would, or maybe it's an ordinance. I think it's a resolution. Check with legal counsel, but to authorize us to have these personnel exceed the budget and then memorialize that, fine tune the numbers in the mid-buy. But these would be LTEs, limited term employees. And so this would require the council to approve that in the 25-26 budget as well. And if we're talking the 27-28 budget, whether it's still +3 or we're down to +1 or +2, this will get touched every time the council touches the budget. And then we'll also have the true up in the mid buys, but exactly where those peaks and where that bell curve actually maxes out is going to be hard to determine at this point.
the biggest point I'd like to make is this is really about flexibility for me to hire folks, because you could give me +10 if I can't hire the people. Doesn't really matter about the budget because we're not going to use it if I can't get people in. So it's really about, instead of saying you can only hire the amount that I have, and then that list, I have 2 people I can pull. If I have flexibility of 5 people, 6 people, then I can get them in, and then we're going to end up getting down to our levels. And that's just up to myself and city administration to manage it properly.
I think Councilmember Bodie has a question. Welcome.
I do. Thank you very much. And thank you for a thoughtful presentation and informative, Chief. A question I have is, when we talk about LTEs, what is the term and can it be extended? So that's a question. I'd like to make a comment after.
Okay, I can answer that, but I'm going to let Phil do that better than me.
So the LTE that you would approve would be through the end of this budget cycle. So through the 23-24 budget, and then you would have to reauthorize that for the 25-26 budget and ongoing. And then, as I mentioned before, as we did mid-biennial adjustments, that may be a time where the chief's getting to the point where he's comfortable in the outer years where we reduce that LTE if things are looking good.
My question is, when we hire someone, are we hiring them for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years? So the LTE seen from the perspective of the employee, how does that work?
In the budget, it's an LTE that the chief can't carry 3+ indefinitely. The idea is this is a replacement program. So the way that I've charted it out is, as you get into the outer years, as people retire, these LTEs become FTEs. They're replacing those who leave. It's just that the authorization for these LTEs is what you're approving they will become full-time employees. They will backfill that. And it's just some undetermined, whether it's 3 or 4, 5 years where you have additional over the FTE count.
I think
Okay,
it-
that makes sense to me. Yeah. I'm sorry, did I speak over someone?
Nope, you're good.
Go.
Okay, I just want to say that in my previous job, I had a succession planning issue with projected retirements within, I think we looked at a 5-year horizon actually, and planned for that. And I did use term positions as a way to start evaluating people and having people ready to fill some of those gaps that we saw in bench strength going forward. So the concept I really support. I'm interested in my situation. We actually hired people for 2-year terms, and then we transitioned them if we felt it was appropriate and if we had a position open. And in my case also, we could extend those term positions for a little bit if we wanted to. So I just mentioned those, which is the background for some of the questions I was asking. But Phil, that makes a lot of sense that we would transition them at the appropriate time, because I think it looks like our gaps and position openings will be occurring sooner than 5 years from now. So in fact, they're ongoing. So Chief and Phil, thank you very much. I think it's a very thoughtful approach, and I support the proposal.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues? Mr. Lebo.
Thank you, Chief Harden, for the presentation. I'm not quite sure how you might answer this, but when you look at years of service, 53 and 5 or 50 and 20, when you hire a new employee, are you trying to maximize the number of years of service that might become available, given the cost and expense of trying to hire one? Because if you have a transfer that has 19 years of experience and they're 49,
I don't want to get into legal trouble here.
I don't know if that's something that can be answered.
Because you get into the category of ageism if you go and say, well, I'm going to hire this person for a few years and then they're going to retire. I mean, I would love to have a very young group that can go for many years, but I also understand the veteran experience with people. So I've got to kind of balance that. Honestly, council member, I just want really good, experienced folks or skilled people that want to stay here. That's what I'm really looking for, because sometimes people use our department, or used to use when I first got here, as stepping stone. They go, oh, we'll go to this small department, we'll grab as much training and experience we can, and then we'll go to the big department. And we've proven for 20 years now that when we get you, we got you, and we want to continue to keep that going. And then maybe somebody only has 10 years left in their career and they've been a lateral, but maybe they stay a little bit longer because they love doing the work and it's a great city. And so that's the best I can answer, I think.
Actually, it's a very good answer, and that you're
Okay.
trying to attract people that will fit into the community very well for a long period of
Absolutely.
time. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues? Mr. Goldman.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation and for your frank assessment of where we're at. I'm on board with this. I know in my day job, we've struggled coming out of the pandemic. We had a lot of churn that we weren't expecting. And it had some consequences on our ability to do mentorship, where we lost a lot of the people who would have been the mentors. So then we had people who were, had 2 years experience that were now tasked with mentoring people with 1 year's experience. And I'd like us to avoid that if we can. So yeah, it did scare me a little seeing how much red there was at the sergeant level and above. Not that those people will necessarily be retiring imminently, but the extent that we can get a good crew for them to mentor while they're here, I think that would be good.
Thank you, council member. And I got to say, we're not unique. A lot of police departments are in the same positions where they have a lot of folks that are leaving, and then the newer officers are now taking on supervisor roles, and they haven't been doing it very long. And that can be a little scary.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Chair Castlever, Mr. Furutani.
Well, thank you very much, Chief. And we've had the chance to talk about this a little before. So this wasn't a surprise to me today. So I really want to commend you for thinking ahead. And I totally understand what Councilmember Goldman is talking about too, and what you're talking about. Really assessing your future as a department is a very important part of your job.
Mhm.
And thank you for doing it well. I think this is a great plan. I will be very interested to see the numbers when our financial director is able to show us that, just to make sure it's all going to work out. But I'm on board with this. I think it's the right approach.
Councilmember Furtoni.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Chief, for the presentation. And I really do appreciate you bringing up that role of culture, because if you have, as Councilmember Goldman and Councilmember Lee were talking about, a lot of churn, the tendency is to basically invent your own culture in the absence of one, and it may not be something it's appropriate for our community. So I think the idea of mentorship and having people on board for a certain amount of time to get an understanding of what our community is and how it is different from other communities, I think is a very critical piece. So thank you for thinking about that.
I appreciate you saying that, because when my officers hear comments like that, it just continues to build that culture, because they know how important it is.
Going to weigh in here just quickly. Chief, I thank you very much, both to you and to Administrator Hill, for bringing this to us. I'm broadly supportive. I think it's an excellent forward-thinking approach to this, and I sincerely appreciate that you're looking kind of down the horizon here and over the horizon, actually, to see where we're going to be and where we need to be. I am always very impressed with the culture in our PD. The public is immensely supportive of your team, and I know that starts with you and your leadership group. So thank you for that. And I really think that we've heard it over and over again in this community, how supportive the community is of the PD, and we as policymakers need to do whatever we can, not only to assist you on the financial side of it and programmatically helping you build your team up, but also thinking outside the box about what additional incentives that we could help you in terms of recruitment, retention, culture, and things like that, as limited experience that we have in that regard. But I thank you for this, and again, seeing the numbers, I think will be sort of a last step, but I think it's a really sound plan. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I want to echo all of my colleagues. I think culture is critical. I think we've created very intentionally a culture here. And I would also like to echo if there's any ways to sort of retain those that are carrying the culture long enough so that they're able to share that with the new recruits, so that we have a continuity. Be interested in any of those plans that you might be thinking about, to see if there's something that we can do there as well.
I will
sir.
definitely do that.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any other questions for Chief Harden? Councilmember Bodie, did you have any last thoughts or questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Chief. What are the next steps?
The next steps is I'd like the authorization, but I don't know how the financial piece plays into this, but I have a group on the civil service list that I'm right now want to start offering jobs. I am very close to offering jobs to 2 laterals. In fact, I'm writing the letters right now in anticipation at the end of the week to get moving on. But that fills that immediate 2. That means that I still can do it with the sergeant that is limited term that leaves, but I've got 3, maybe 4 or 5 people that I really want to start looking at deeper. So I need to know when I have that authorization.
We could bring that to you on the 10th of August for action. And that will give Director Vaughn some time to crunch a few numbers.
You bet.
We know holistically that, if you hired all 3 today, it's about a $500,000 hit. But we need to suggest where you would pay for that. So we'll put that together for the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Hill, and thank you, Chief. I certainly would know that we're all in agreement here that we don't want to be, as policymakers, slowing down the process because you have immediate needs and you have people that are strike while the iron is hot, so to speak. And I think
Thank you.
we're going into summer recess here later. In
Yeah.
few weeks. So I want to make
That's
sure
what
we
I
don't
was-
slow the
yes.
process down.
I think August 10th will work because that's I think 17 days-ish away. It's 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks. I think that should be okay. Because again, our processes are so long anyway. It's just I need to stay on top of folks that I don't lose them too. There's a lot of selling of our city to people to stay too. So
Fair
thank you
enough.
very much.
Okay,
All right.
thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Very good. All right, everyone, we'll move on to our continued discussion regarding the updates to the governance manual. And just a reminder, we had this one last little, thank you, Chief. One last section that we didn't get to because it was the not wee hours of the morning, but late in the evening. And I think we were all a little bit threadbare at that final one. So we are on section 8, or as Councilmember Furtani and I like to refer to as section 12. We had that stuck in our head earlier today. We were thinking there is no section 12, just for clear. We did. We were both thinking the same, conflating the same thing. So we are on page, where are we here? We are on page 54 of the redlined on relationship between the council, mayor, and city administrator, staff, and the public. And I had made a note here that we are going to be revisiting this on June 5th. Unfortunately, other pressing matters got in the way. So does anybody have thoughts here? Going down through Article 8. There's a couple of changes here in the removal of the RCW and updating them. Well, actually, there's 2 updates. I'm sorry, there's 2 updates in 8.1. I don't think there's much to look at there, and then renumbering. And then as we approach the bottom of the page, city administrator interference by council members. It's kind of hard with these red lines here to see what the specific RCW is here, but is RCW 35A.13.120. It's a very critical component of the mix, as we all know, and it's an essential RCW, as I hear from some of my colleagues out there in other cities.
Question.
Councilmember Riddle.
Just a quick question about the language in revised numbering 8.3 around the city attorney. I don't know if appointed is really the correct process that we're using right now, as it is, as I understand, a contracted position. So I think maybe we might want to just open that up into a more broader, because that implies that when I think of appointment, I think of to an internal position, and that just might be my thinking of the word. So just to be more broad and to capture what we are doing, that would allow perhaps both, either contract or internal. Just something for us to think about.
Okay. Let's give it some additional thought.
Mhm.
Comments? Yeah,
It's interesting, actually, because I don't know what the process is, because we have had the same firm ever since I've been on the council. So I don't know what the actual process is if we were to reconsider that particular
Did
firm.
have to, I think, when she changed firms, and I believe a contract came in front of us, but that we approved the contract, new contract.
Mr. Hill.
Right. So when Ms. Pratt started her own firm, the city followed her and the associates that went with her. That contract was brought before council on recommendation of the mayor to continue with her services under Madrona law. And I was just pulling up our municipal code 2.08.060 attorney contract. City attorney shall be retained according to a contract establishing compensation and other terms. So I think Councilmember Riddle's point, we could match our own municipal code instead of appointment. It's contract, and I'm not sure on your wording. Pardon me?
Would
Retained, I think
be
retained is a
the
good,
right word.
yeah. .08.060.
Pardon me, I didn't have my mic on. Sorry, Matt. The vagaries of how, I don't know how the page got split this way, but it continues on to page 56. It's not a break there. And there's nothing missing there. The provisions of this section do not prohibit the council, et cetera, et cetera. So we're clear there. And then 8.6 complaints to council members. I think this is pretty straightforward. And then additional 8.7 thoughts. Anyone there? Administrative complaints, best practice. I think this is one of those places, we've talked about it before, that we have a culture of making sure that we're not mavericking, so to speak. And I think this is fairly clear, but certainly we could entertain some additional clarity if it was necessary. I don't think it needs to be overtly prescriptive, because I think the group tends to, whoever it may be, tends to find its norms and expectations.
I think I'd like some clarity in here, as to what this kind of, I know what we're trying to prevent. I just don't know if it's really in there. I mean, I think we're trying to prevent council members from making promises on behalf of staff. And I think maybe we should just be really clear about that. Because oftentimes council will get an email, but it won't include the relevant staff folks. And so we will forward to them, but we're not making a promise, but we're technically intervening. So I just want to make sure that we're clear about what the intent of this is, that we don't make promises on behalf of staff.
Okay, thank you for that. Running off the page here. Okay. All right. I'm sorry, Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with these two sections. I wonder, could we add maybe something about the two-way communication? Because if a member of the public emails me and then I pass it along to an appropriate staff member, just making sure that the circle is closed and I find out that, just make sure that the person has been helped, or at least, or the member of the public has been given the information they need.
I think that's an excellent thought.
And related, like if a member of the public emails the city council email, so all 7 of us get that, then just making sure that we're aware, that somebody has responded to them. That way it's not sort of in like a limbo where all of us are waiting for someone else. And so the member of the public doesn't actually hear anything. Just making sure we avoid that situation.
Deputy Mayor, I can't hear you at all. Do
Oh,
you
I'm
have your
sorry.
mic on?
I'm sorry.
Sorry. I was trying to read your lips, but it was unsuccessful.
My apologies. Sorry. I'm having to shift the other way where we have to press the microphone. So I think Councilmember Goldman makes an excellent point. And I think that the additional, maybe what sentence of clarity here we can add to the mix, and I'll see if we can come up with some proposed language for that. Vice Chair Cassover.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. And I think that maybe another clarifying point that could be put into this section is that the situation that Councilmember Goldman brought up, when an email comes from a member of the public to all of us, to the city council as a whole, and none of us are sure what's going on. I did, when I was in the deputy mayor spot, try to make that part of my responsibility to be the one to respond. And I know you've been doing the same. So I think it might actually be good that we put that in here, that it is in fact council leadership who should be taking the lead when the council as a whole is asked a question or a complaint is brought forward from a member of the public, that council leadership should take it upon themselves to make sure that the communication has happened, and then maybe it's up to a staff member to let the whole council know if how the situation then gets resolved.
Excellent point. Thank you. Councilmember Riddle. Sorry.
Thank you. I also feel that it's useful for all of our members to be part of that process. So I think there's a question there of like an established process where we know it's happening, but also sort of sharing the responsibility and that engagement with public. I think it would be useful if, as soon as something is forwarded to the staff, and I usually say, hey, this appears to be in your court and you weren't part of it, that they maybe send out a all city council email saying, I've received this and we're working on it, just so that there's that feedback in case you guys are busy and so forth. So I don't want to prevent my colleagues from stepping in if they feel that it's important and we don't know yet whether leadership has had a chance to deal with it, because we don't have that feedback. So as long as we get that feedback from staff, I think that's the critical piece for me.
Thank you for your thoughts, Councilman Riddle. I think we should institute a trouble ticket system and assign it. That would be a violation of the OPMA, I'm pretty sure.
Are you saying I'm trouble?
But I think there's ways to do this. And the other thing, I will make a note to check with our legal counsel about, is it acceptable for us to say to the group, this has been responded to, as opposed to the substance of it. I don't know whether that crosses the line. Mr. Hill, do you have any thoughts about that? There's a real fine line there, whether it's nuts and bolts as opposed to policy making. So calendaring, for example, those kinds of things is quite different when it's informational one way. So I'll make a note to reach out to Kim and see what her thoughts on that is in terms of the communication, so that there's broad understanding both from the response or handoff to staff, et cetera, so we can find a way to make sure that there's a resolution. Councilmember Bodie.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to say that I actually appreciate that when I get copies of things, I usually get a copy of the staff response. So when the council is trying to figure it out, I agree with Councilmember Riddle. It's good to know who's responding. Sometimes it is, usually it's staff, sometimes it is a council member. So sometimes I don't know who's responding, but I assume someone is. Sometimes I ask the city administrator if I haven't seen a response. But so I think our current practice is pretty good. When I first came on council, it was much more unpredictable whether there would be a response and who would do it. So I really support this discussion. I don't think we need to overthink it and be overly prescriptive, because I think we have a pretty good system right now, is I guess all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Excellent thoughts. Thank you. A little feedback there. Yeah, and I agree. I don't think we need to overthink this. We'll try to keep it as simple as possible and not too prescriptive. Okay, so I hate to say this, but that brings us to the end of the governance manual. What we'll do from here going forward. Yes.
Yes, I would actually like for us to have a little bit of discussion about 8.8.
Please.
So one of the things that I have long wished for here at the City of Lake Forest Park is reports from staff on a regular schedule. This is true in other cities, that you would get a quarterly report from your planning department, from your building department, from your public works department on ongoing projects, their progress, their budget issues, whatever. And ours have been a little bit more ad hoc, and I think we might benefit from having that be more regular. I don't know what the rest of you think about that, but and I won't be here, of course, for this, but I think it's something worth thinking about.
Thank you, Councilmember. Okay, we can certainly consider that. I think that's appropriate. More information is always helpful. And Councilmember Riddle.
And I would reiterate, I think that would be a very good idea. And I think we have new systems in place that make that, I think, a lot easier than it was when I first joined council. So I think looking into the ease of that replicability of a quarterly report would be beneficial for council and the community.
And yes, if I could just add, it is in my mind that quarterly report include quite a bit of data that we currently don't get. So for example, numbers of permits for ADUs. I still don't know that answer to that question. I've been wondering about it since we passed the ADU ordinance. You know, just numbers of permits for new construction, numbers of permit, just those kind of things, so that we as a council have a little bit better of a picture of what in fact is going on in the city.
I think Councilmember Furtani was next, and then Councilmember Bodie.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I agree with Councilmember Cassover that having a follow-up with data would be wonderful, not just with ADUs, but for instance, something like the Salary Commission. I don't even know if that's met. And so, you know, these kinds of things fall through the cracks. And I always want to know what the end of the story is, or at least basically how the story progressed after we've had our hands on it. So it would be great to have that kind of report.
Thank you, Councilmember Bodie.
Yes, I completely agree. I think it would be really good to know, especially some of the kinds of examples that Councilmember Cassover mentioned. Those are things that I do feel like council members in other cities get regular reporting on, and it would be helpful for us. And to make it kind of routine practice, but easy. I don't think we're trying to burden staff, but we're looking for just standard performance information and metrics. I second that wholeheartedly.
May I suggest that we conscript recruit a council member to write said language? Is there a volunteer?
I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you, Philippa.
I'm glad to work with you on it, Philippa, if you want.
I was going to suggest the same. Thank you, Lori. You must have a thought.
I do have a thought. My finger was thinking. I was actually thinking a little bit more, talking about this communication up at 8.4 on the previous page and a half. And where we talk about the members of council are encouraged to interact with the city staff for the purpose of gathering information, obtaining progress reports on policies and programs. So it's kind of, there's some language in there which is similar to what we're talking about, but just establishing it that some of those items on a regular basis, rather than having it be sort of just buried in that paragraph. So I think we'd want to marry those two paragraphs together in some way and balance them. And then I think the last piece is around in 8.8. The council does not have its own separate research staff at this time. Let's leave that door open.
Dream on, Councilmember.
There are interns, maybe, I don't know, but I do want to say, I do want to say, as it kind of it would be lovely if there was an opportunity that arose at some point in the future. That we say that this is a desire of council, because I think it also says that we don't intend to burden staff. Our goal is to have the answers we need. Currently, staff is the way we do that. But I will leave it to the council whether that's a decision that you guys want to make for the governance manual, but it's something I think I'd like to leave the door open in here for.
Thank you. The thoughts, Mr. Lebo.
I'm very much in supportive of periodic reports on a regular basis. I have to do them every month, every bi-weekly. And so I have to status whatever we're doing on a regular basis, almost weekly in some cases. I have been disappointed in the level of reporting that we've been receiving and the lack of frequency that we've been receiving them. I'm not sure I would be in favor of having a research or independent person working for the council.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think that would be If the city wins the lottery, maybe. Probably a poor joke. Other thoughts? And again, we will be looking at trying to bring back the red line version cleaned up by sometime. It'll be sometime in September, I believe. And I have one more topic on scheduling after governance manual. Is there anything else on point on governance manual? Thank you, everybody. I apologize that we weren't able to get to this in June. Lots of pressing things that have been happening. There's this thing called sound transit seems to be taking some of our free time away from us. Scheduling, August wise, I'm trying to, in discussions with Mr. Hill today about trying to ensure that people actually have the opportunity to have a bit of a break. We have traditionally canceled the second August meeting. And the way the vagaries of this month are working out, there's a committee of the whole meeting on, I believe, the 24th, which if there is nothing pressing, we can cancel it. On the other hand, my colleagues, Mr. Goldman and Councilmember Riddle, have wanted to bring back a consideration of a neighborhood streets type of program. So we could certainly do that at an earlier date, which would be, I believe would be Monday, the 7th. It seems like the most feasible time frame. Are you all available that time? Councilmember Bodie.
Yes, I am available, but I want to also bring up the reasonable use exception work, which we got almost done, and asked staff and council to come back with some minor changes. And we have that recommendation from the Planning Commission. So I would like to, in the near future, if not in August, then in September, make sure we wrap that up. My impression was we were so close to wrapping it up and having council feedback and incorporated into the draft. I believe there were only a few issues, maybe 3, where there were some suggestions for revision from the council. So I just want to keep that on everyone's radar. I fear the loss of momentum from our recent conversation, which is now months ago, that we end up losing the ability. We have to start over at the beginning too much if we don't wrap it up fairly soon. So just flagging to keep that on the radar, especially it's a product that our current planning director worked all the way through the Planning Commission. And so it would be a fitting testimonial to get it done, at least shortly after he leaves.
Excellent points, Councilmember Bodie. Mr. Hill, is it reasonable to consider us bringing that back? What do you think is the most effective time frame?
So to Councilmember Bodie's points, I've been working with Director Bennett to put together a schedule of everything that'll be outstanding upon his departure. And I do have the RUE scheduled tentatively for the September 17th meeting. I met with him. We do have Commerce and SEPA outstanding on that, but we could wrap up the language. So we'll need to circle back with everybody here and make sure that the language is where you want it. I think the outstanding issue was the square footage size. We need to answer that question. Once we have a good determination of the language we're going to adopt, then it'll go to Commerce and SEPA determination, but we do have it scheduled for September because we got a few other things that we've got to get through. Retaining wall, tree codes. I've got your sign code coming at you, hopefully in October. So we've got a lot of things that we're putting on the schedule, whether that's me or a new director, but we are scheduling those out.
I would add the sign code was another one where we have a months ago now recommendation from the Planning Commission. So I really would like to not have things slip past September, coming close to wrapping them up in September. I really think I don't want to get into the holiday season and not have gotten that work done.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm sorry, Mr. Lebo, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. I have taken my week off and scheduled it to not interfere with any council meetings, and I will not be here on the 7th.
Fair enough. Okay. Vice Chair Cassover, and then I'll circle back here.
Yes, thank you. And this is just again agenda setting. Does council need to approve a new contract of any kind with our hauler for solid waste? I know that there's been some work on the whole billing issue, and I don't know where we are with that.
They're actually coming to present to council on the 10th during your work session to get that up and running. I think we have to have that done by October. End of September. So yes, we have that on the schedule. That's coming at you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, my recommendation is that we just go ahead and cancel the committee of the whole for August, unless there is a date that would work for everyone. It would have to be the either this, Mr. Lebo's gone the 7th. Are you available on the 14th? Yes. Anyone else have a conflict on Monday, the 14th, in case we wanted to? Okay, my recommendation is, so we're going to meet as the agenda team tomorrow. We'll have a conversation about what we've got coming down the line and what is urgent from a scheduling standpoint. I do completely agree with Councilmember Bodie in terms of momentum on some of these things. Timing gets a little awkward around August, and if it's necessary for us to have a committee of the whole in August on the 14th, then we can certainly put something into the mix if that means it'll help us jumpstart our September busy season. So, Councilmember Riddle.
So do we want to officially cancel the committee of the whole and the business meeting on the 21st and the 24th last week? Or have we already? I don't think we've already done that. I can't remember.
Officially, I don't believe that the 24th has been, we did not cancel that yet, but traditionally we have. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. So it's okay. And we won't,
Maybe we
we don't
jump
take
the gun.
action here. So
Yeah, we can't take action here
yeah,
anyways, but
Mr. Goldman.
Should we take action on Thursday for that? Do we need? Yes.
certainly could. We'll have a final schedule.
I'm in favor of having Cal on the 14th. I think it's something that we could talk about the RUEs, and also that the three of us have been working on the pedestrian streets. I would very much like to share that with the other council members.
I agree. And I think there's no time like the present. So we'll talk with the agenda team tomorrow, and we'll talk about considering RUE for the committee of the whole, as well as the neighborhood streets program. Any other thoughts on scheduling? Mr. Lebo.
I'm just wondering if there's a lot for us to do, should we even cancel the August 24th meeting? I'm here.
Thank you. I don't think we've ever held a meeting the last week of August. I can't remember. Tradition be darned. I mean, I don't think it's necessary, but I think that we've done it often out of consideration of staff as well in terms of time frame. So, but we can talk about that and see where we are in terms of what we have pending here. One of the challenges too, of course, with the departure of Mr. Bennett, there's going to be some things that are going to have to be ramped up, and with limited resources, a lot of this is falling on Administrator Hill's already overburdened shoulders. So, any other thoughts on scheduling? Okay, I think that is all we have. We're finishing up right at 7 o'clock, and if there's nothing else to discuss, we will get you guys up to speed on scheduling after we have our meeting tomorrow. We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.